Okay, here with my main man, Stuckey, Action Network, big bets on campus. You can find him tweeting up a storm come Saturday and Sunday when the pigskin's getting tossed around, and he's furious. Before we dive in to two of the better college games of the season, I rode you last week because, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Tomlin, Ravens, that was a fucking roller coaster. I mean, at one point in time, it's 10-3, and it's like they're going to lose this game 20-3, and they're not even going to come remotely close to covering. And then they end up winning outright. That is, Stuckey, that is why we gamble. That was a roller coaster of emotions. You could have $500 on a game, and the highs of that wouldn't sniff making 5Gs in the normal world. There's nothing like gambling, bro.
Yeah, it was classic Ravens Steelers game. The Steelers look lost. Their offense is still so bad. They have one play, and it's throw it to George Pickens up the sideline. Try using that guy in the middle of the field too. He's amazing. They got a touchdown out of it, and they got a couple other big plays. But yeah, there was a block punt. Then you're like, we didn't recover it, but we got a safety. We're inside the number. We're getting the ball back. Just need a first down or punt it, and then we're good. They fumble the punt. I mean, they fumble the kickoff after the safety. Pops right into a Ravens hand, and you say, we're done. It's over. And then Lamar throws a horrific pick in the end zone on an underthrown fade route, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, we're back. Then you're like, it's still the Steelers offense. And then they hit a bomb down the sidelines. Yeah, that was that felt more like a crazy college game than an NFL game with all of the blunders, the drops. It was like a midweek MAC game. But yeah, that was amazing. But the story for me of the weekend was whiffing on Dallas and New England. Learned a lot about both. I mean, we said it last week. If New England can't rally there in that spot after losing 38-3, well, guess what? Now it's 72-3 after the past 2 weeks. Special teams are a mess. Their wide receivers don't run any routes. There's no pass protection. Mac Jones looks broken. He's thrown off his back foot. He looks like he's regressed. He's never been great, but he's looked like he's regressed somehow. And that team is an absolute mess. They have. And Bill's definitely lost his fastball. I mean, and look, he said this week we got to start over. You're starting over, and it's week 6. And he's got all these guys on his staff. Like everyone blamed Patricia last year. Patricia wasn't the problem. But he's got all these guys on his staff, like Troy Brown is the wide receiver coach. Gerard Mayo. Like it feels more just like, hey, he's just been hiring his like old players on his staff, and that was such an embarrassing loss. His 2 worst losses of his career in back-to-back weeks speaks volumes. And then learned a lot about Dallas. Wasn't shocked that San Fran won. It was in the way that they won. And Dallas just had such a bad game plan. And I have to give credit to the San Francisco offensive line. But how they were trying to bring pressure. Like, you don't get pressure on Purdy, he's going to destroy you, which is exactly what happened. And the San Fran offensive line held up well. But I went into the week thinking, all right, Dallas, well, I'll give them an excuse on that Arizona game. They had injuries. An NFL team's going to have 1 or 2 games where it's just an off week. But then you see, Arizona's been getting crushed ever since. They crushed New England. And then I'm watching early in the day, I'm watching the Saints beat New England 34-0. So I'm like, all right, maybe that didn't mean as much. And so coming into the weekend, I was like, Dallas is one of the main contenders in the NFC. I don't see it. I don't, obviously they're going to get into the playoffs most likely, and it's football. You're going to have a chance, but I just don't think that they have the same ceiling as the Eagles and especially the 49ers, who I now have power rated as the best team in football, surpassing the Bills and Chiefs. It's a lot of it's play calling. The play calling is really bad, and then Dak I'm getting similar vibes to Russell Wilson. So once Russell Wilson got older and couldn't move around, right? He wasn't the same quarterback. He would just improvise, buy time, make plays downfield. Now, Dak's not, he's too old. But since that injury that he had, that horrific injury when he was running, he doesn't run anymore. He doesn't move anymore. And he's just not the same guy as a pure pocket passer. And that limits his upside. So, yeah, that was a really dominant win by San Francisco. Dallas hyped that game up. Local media all week. This is a team we lost to past 2 postseasons. And to get humiliated, that speaks volumes to where I think this Dallas team can go this year. I know it's only 1 game, but it's very telling. And yeah, San Fran does it again. It's a shame that we're probably going to get. I wanted to see the San Fran team go up against the Cleveland defense, which I think is the best in the league. It's a shame we're going to get not Deshaun. We're probably going to get PJ Walker. But very, very impressed by San Francisco and underwhelmed by both Dallas and New England. Bad calls there.
Yeah, to me, it's why Cousins a better player than Dak Prescott right now, because he's never been predicated on moving. Like his game, he's a pocket quarterback. Now he's got flaws and he's got limitations, and he's never going to be viewed as a top 6-7 guy. But in that 8 to 12 range, he's just a better player because Dak Prescott is not as good in the pocket, and like you said, he cannot move. The other thing is, I understand the Cousins, and I talked about this on yesterday's podcast, not paying him if you're Minnesota, right? You didn't bring him in. He's older. To extend him costs a lot, limit your ability, just kind of reset. I understand that. I've always thought, like, what is Dallas going to do? But I kind of understand it because he's making 40 a year. So it's not like you can pay Dak 27. You're like, well, you're not quite as good. He's going to want 44 to 45 a year. So it's like, fuck that. I can't, not that, and ultimately Dallas, I picked them to compete with the Niners when the season started and the Eagles, but it's pretty clear it's him. The rest of their team has issues and Mike McCarthy is not, Vince Lombardi here. But if that's your quarterback play, like Dante Whitner, who does local TV in San Francisco, said it after the game, like he sucks like that at the highest level, like that gets you beat every time against, a Super Bowl contender. And that's ultimately the way Dallas was talked about. But then you look back, what was their downfall the last 2 years of the 49ers? Him, picks, interceptions. And you cannot listen, we can nitpick Purdy and there's still a lot to be determined, but if your quarterback is not Mahomes or Allen, you can't overcome playing elite teams and throwing a pick in a playoff game. And that's essentially what Sunday night was, right? It was a playoff level game and he threw 3. Now the third one, whatever, but what the fuck were some of those passes? I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, speaking of his mobility, because he used to be able to extend drives with his legs, and there was a game against Arizona, in like the read option game, they were near the goal line and they were running a read option, and he put the ball in Pollard's stomach and had a chance to, if he pulls it, it's a third down. He's clear path running in his one, safety that's going to come up and hit him. He just kept it in the shoulder, gets tackled. So he just doesn't want to risk injury. He's just hesitant after that horrific injury. And yeah, he's just not going to be able to get it done from the pocket, especially with that play calling. It's just really poor. And it was just a huge coaching mismatch at the end of the day on both ends. So yeah, for the NFC, it's here. I ask you an interesting question before we get started. You pull up the 49ers schedule. Not only do I have them power rated as the best team in the NFL right now, they're also starting to get schedule breaks. So, you missed who did they miss? The
quarterback's hurt this week. I mean, Deshaun Watson might not play.
You play so I'm almost positive it's going to be PJ Walker, who wasn't even on the roster yesterday.
Yeah, he's not beating the 49ers. So
yeah, the Browns have to win that game 3-0, and they got to hope that there's 60-mile-an-hour winds, not 30. But then you're going to play the Vikings without Jefferson the next week. So you look at their schedule, and if you had a guess, where are we starting to talk about Niners undefeated?
They do have a curveball in there. Obviously the Eagle game is going to be, what would you guess, assuming both teams relatively healthy? Eagles are favored in that game by maybe 2?
Yeah, 1.5.
So that's a losable game. That's a big time game. And the other game that is tricky is they play Seattle short week Thanksgiving night. Just late season road game, short week. That to me is just a weird spot. Like you could go 16-1 if you have an off week. Maybe you have some injuries that week, right? Maybe a guy that could play Sunday can't quite play Thursday. That's just that place be rocking if Seattle's good. I would say that in the Eagle game. And I would say this, the other thing is, now granted it was Jimmy Garoppolo. The Niners have historically under Kyle lost some random games, right? Like an Atlanta Falcon game, obviously a couple years ago with Trey Lance, the opener, the Bears who but it's definitely on the table. I would say they get to 10-0. It's 100% real.
Yeah.
There's still a long way to go.
At Browns and at Vikings, I would have thought probably maybe trip up one of them, but now no Jefferson and no quarterback. That gets a lot easier. The Eagles, I think they beat the Eagles. They're going to have revenge. They're going to be waiting for that game. They have extra rest for that game too, which makes that trip to Seattle is definitely I circled because that's a short week. You have the Eagles game on deck. Like, are you looking ahead a little bit? But even at the Jags, that comes after a bye.
Where's the Ravens game at home?
Yeah, the Ravens on Christmas, they're always, they're one of the feistiest underdogs in the NFL.
Remember the year the 49ers made the Super Bowl. Now that Ravens team was obviously healthier and better. I think Lamar won the MVP that year, but in the rain, he kind of sliced and diced them. You remember that game?
Yeah. That was
after Thanksgiving. It was a couple days after Thanksgiving.
Yep. Horrible weather game. And then the two that I'd circled, at Seattle obviously is going to be tricky. I think they beat the Eagles. I think they get the next two. Bengals at home, and the Ravens at home. I know both those games are at home, but if Burrow's looking healthier, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, if that offense is humming, they could beat anybody on any field. But maybe that might be a topic of discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like last year. Once they got to like 8-9-0, everyone was like, "Look at the Eagles' schedule," and they cruised to 14-3. It feels like the Niners' worst case scenario are kind of doing that. And honestly, they feel closer to like a 15-2 team than they do 13-14 win teams. And that record. Would you rather lose a game than have the undefeated? Because you go undefeated, anything less than a Super Bowl is a complete failure. It just is. It's like the year the Warriors won 73 games. Anything less than the championship, you'll always be known as the team that didn't get it done. The Patriots, 16-0. It's just you have to win the championship or else it's a failure, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a fan or on the team, like there's you want to go undefeated, just you'd be in the history books. But if I'm a coach or just like look objectively for the chances of a team winning the Super Bowl, I bet if you ask like Kyle Shanahan, like candidly, and you ask most good coaches, they probably want your team to lose once. It's not college where a loss could doom you, because you want at least one game during the season where you can say, all right, this is what we need to clean up to get through to your team. Because if you just keep winning, you guys are like, who cares? Why do I have to really listen to you? But like having a game where it's like, all right, let's refocus. We got to clean these things up, and it kind of helps you clean those little things up that might get overlooked if you just keep beating teams throughout the season. And you put a bigger target on your back. You add so much added pressure in the playoffs. So objectively, like just for a team's chances, I think they'd be better off.
Honestly, if you could choose, to me, you want to beat all the teams. Obviously, all the the Eagles, but then the other teams in the other conference that you never know, right? Like the Ravens, the Bengals. Like you'd want to win You'd honestly rather drop like an Arizona or like in a couple weeks at Minnesota. That's just kind of an irrelevant game that you can just always look back on. Why we always got to stay focused. I think you'd circle, like you wouldn't want to lose to Seattle because you might play Seattle in the first round or the second round. Yeah. So you would want to lose to a team who's destined to draft in the top 10, I think.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, okay, let's before we dive into some of the picks, two college games that I think that Niners Cowboy game is kind of collegiate, where it's like, this is going to be a big time game. Then all of a sudden you're sitting on the couch and you're like, this is not a close game. And when you look at Oregon and Washington, feels a lot like Niners Cowboys. Like, fuck, this thing's going to be a war zone. The Oregon's 3-point favorite. It's very like an NFL line, historic rivals, geographical rivals, conference rivals going together now to the Big Ten. Whoever wins this game is going to be on the fast track. I mean, you could argue if Oregon were to win this game, like, you could argue they're the best team in the country. If Washington were to win this game, they're definitely a title contender. I don't know if you'd quite put them one based on their schedule, but it would be very, very impressive. And then USC Notre Dame. I had a couple buddies as the hype started on Hartman that said based on last year, they had him great. NFL guys had him as a third day guy. And they're like, I'm not going to buy the hype. They're playing nobody. Let's wait till he plays some better teams. And it's been a little bit of a struggle for him. Not that he's a bad player. He made some really nice passes last week. But I definitely, the hype train has slowed down a little bit. And, Marcus Freeman, I would say the better teams they played kind of getting exposed here a little bit. But that line's a little weird to me. And I know USC's defense is off, but USC's an underdog. Now, part of it may just be the defense. Either one of these games stand out to you as something that's off with the line or a team you like of these 4 teams. Now, Notre Dame's out of it now, right? They're not a playoff team, but these other 3 teams obviously don't just have playoff hopes. I mean, it's weird calling USC a national title contender, but if you ask Lincoln Riley, he probably thinks they are.
Yeah, I mean, you have Caleb Williams in that offense. If they get, I think that they're at least in the group that could win it potentially. I don't think that they're ultimately going to get there, but and I actually think, I don't know if because the college football playoff, there's the rankings, there's human bias, but I feel like neither, if USC or Oregon or Washington loses this weekend, they shouldn't necessarily be eliminated from the college football playoff, right? It's like an SEC team that loses in the past, like when the SEC is so strong, I don't think necessarily a one loss and a good loss, one loss Pac-12 champion. So say like Oregon loses and then beats Washington again in the Pac-12 championship. I don't think that they should be eliminated. The Pac-12 is arguably the best conference in football this year, but my question on that, because Oklahoma and Texas is shaping up for that. What game do you put more value on? Are they both independently the same, or does the second game ultimately get more value? Right? Yeah, I mean, I think that you tend to give the second game more value on a neutral field. Depends on if the road team on the first, but the committee always values a conference champion too. And then it's the most recent win, so there's recency bias too. So, you're not going to, if the team's split, you're most likely going to take the team that won the conference championship and won the most recent game on a neutral field, all else being equal. But when it comes to these 2 games, look, Notre Dame, they're a mess. You watch them the past 2 weeks, and it speaks to Ohio State's kind of a mess too, because Notre Dame should have beat them. But they go to Duke. They should have lost to Duke. They get blown out by Louisville. Here's the thing, like, their schedule has been horrible. They haven't had a bye yet. They started off in Ireland. They're going to play their 4th straight big game, 4th straight primetime game, 4th straight game against a ranked opponent. I think it's like a 4th straight primetime game in 4 weeks, first time I think in program history. You saw that last week. There was just fatigue. Like, it's hard to get up. You saw it with Colorado a couple times already this year. It's hard to get up every week like this. So they were fatigued, but the offense, Gerard Parker, I think, is a horrible offensive coordinator, and teams have just started loading the box. That's what Duke, that's what Elko did at Duke, and then that's what Louisville did last week. They just put 9 in the box. Said, try to throw it. We'll press your receivers who are bad and hurt. And Notre Dame has to be able to adjust. And then last week they made this asinine decision to rotate offensive linemen the entire game. I don't know who came up with that. But they said they were rotating, got their guards and centers, and they played 8 offensive linemen total, and they were rotating them in and out, and it led to disastrous results and 5 turnovers. So their offense is a mess right now. The play calling's bad, the wide receivers aren't great, and the teams are loading the box, which was the strength of their team. And Hartman, he only could do so much. So the question is, though, number one, can Notre Dame get up again this week? Like, it's another. It
is at home. The place going to be rocking.
Home. It'll be a good atmosphere. You might get some weather, which would help Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's secondary has been very good. USC's run D's been really bad. I think that some of it, their defense is really bad, but some of it's like they kind of just fuck around with some of these bad teams, and they just can't get stops. Like last year, their D was really bad. They loaded the box and stopped Notre Dame's rushing attack. So I assume they're going to do that here, load the box, and then man up on the outside. So yeah, I kind of like USC as a dog, even though I hate their defense. There's so much wrong with this Notre Dame offense right now. And then you kind of just trust Caleb Williams to get over the finish line. This Notre Dame offense isn't an offense right now that is going to fully exploit the USC defense like some of the teams in the Pac-12, I think, will later on this season. And then in Washington, Oregon should be a really good game. I mean, last year it was...
One quick thing, Stuckey, on Notre Dame. I mean, I know he got some positive momentum last year after he lost. I mean, he could have easily lost to Cal. He lost to Marshall. And he lost one other awful game. I forget off the top of my head, but he was, and he kind of got the train back on the tracks. You start losing 3-4 games. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to get fired this year, but he would immediately be like, this could be a 3-and-done type deal for Marcus Freeman. Their expectations, it gets a little easier when they go to 12 teams, but you just can't go from Brian Kelly, who was winning 11, 12 games every year, to start winning 8 and 9. Like, that's just not going to be tolerated. It just won't. So he needs a win like this to just kind of fucking settle the seas.
Yep, I agree. I mean, like the margins are thin when you're a coach. Like, I mean, but they've not been, the coaching's been bad the past couple of weeks. They've been solved. The offensive coordinator hire I didn't like. The narrative would be different if they beat Ohio State, and they should have. But yeah, you're right. Like, and they still have to go. They go to Clemson. The rest of the schedule is pretty easy after this, except for that at Clemson game. But yeah, if they go 8-4, I think it's then hot seat next year.
Yeah, I agree.
If they run the table, he's fine.
Yeah.
And, because that would include wins against
USC,
and
Clemson. Yeah,
he'd be fine. And then you should have beat Ohio State. But yeah, 8-4, like 9-3, I think it's okay. Let's see what we're doing next year. 8-4, it's hot seat time. So yeah, it's a big game for Freeman, for sure. And then in regards to the Washington Oregon game, last year it was 37-34. Washington won in Eugene. Knicks got hurt, and his backup came in, wasn't good towards the end, and then tried to come back. It was an awesome game, back and forth. I kind of like the under. It's scary as hell. These are two of the best offenses in college football, but there could be some weather here in Seattle. And Washington doesn't play fast. Pennick's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He's got 3 great receivers. We'll see it on the health of Odunze and McMillan, who Odunze got banged up last week. McMillan's been out. I think that they're both probably going to play, but both of these defenses are a lot better than last year. And this is like a really hyped game. I think both teams are going to be, kind of a little bit more conservative early on. The Oregon defense is just much better than it was last year. Dan Lanning finally has some pieces to do what he wants to do, play more multiple. They're actually getting a pass rush this year. So, and then on the other side, I think Oregon can run on Washington. Washington's defense has a couple guys they could be getting back. Tooley, who's really important on the D-line. But I think Oregon can methodically run the ball. And, that's going to churn up clock, especially with the new clock rules. So 68, that's a super high total in a big game. You get over that, you need like everything to go right. I mean, you can't have like, and Washington's offense going up against a really good D, their offense isn't great in the red zone because they can't really run the ball. So a couple field goals here and there, a road Bo Nix, interception in the red zone, you're toast. So kind of like the under there. I think Oregon's going to win. I think the line is probably close to right, but my intuition tells me that Oregon's going to win. I think that their defense, 2 weeks to prepare with Lanning, has, and they have the more overall talented roster, even if Washington has Penix, the Heisman frontrunner, and 3 NFL receivers. Overall roster talent, Oregon has more of it. And I think their defense is better equipped to at least slow down Washington. Like, Washington's going to get its points, but stops in the red zone, throw off the timing of that offense with press on the outside. Then Washington does, slowing down Oregon's attack. Like, all the short yardage, Oregon's excellent there, and Washington's been really bad. So like all the 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2s, I think Oregon's going to convert, keep their drives going, and Washington's going to struggle in the red zone more, and then on those short yardage situations where I think you'll get maybe a couple incompletions or sacks. So I think it's going to be a really good game. I think Oregon's going to win. I think the line's about right. my bet. I'm probably going to bet the under a little bit there. I'm waiting to see if it gets to 68.
I bet a lot of people listening or watching have been in an accident. I bet a lot of people have been into an intense car accident. And let's face it, not knowing who to call for help is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy because Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm with over 100 offices nationwide with more than 800 lawyers. They've recovered over $15 billion for over 300,000 clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is so easy. That's the key. Not having representation is hard. Fighting with Morgan & Morgan is easy. If you've ever been injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/JOHN or pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. Okay, let's dive into the National Football League. I've been hammering the last couple weeks, just taking a good team against a shitty team, and I've bet against Carolina 2 weeks in a row. A little more difficult for me to do that this week. I know you'll dive into it. I'm going here with it's basically just essentially a money line bet. The Saints -1 at Houston. I think the Saints are pretty good, especially defensively. Tough spot for a rookie quarterback. I know, everyone's kind of giving Houston and CJ Stroud kind of anointing them, even though they just lost. I just like the Saints in this spot. So it's not quite my philosophy of the last couple weeks, given a big favorite. But I actually think when the dust settles, I think the Saints still end up winning that division. And Houston's probably more likely to win 6 games than they are 9. So I just, getting them -1. I know it's on the road. Easy trip for them. I like the Saints this week.
Yeah, don't mind it. I think that the Texans, I had some Falcons -1.5 last week, which was
That was a roller coaster.
But yeah, I think the Texans have gotten a little bit overvalued in the market due to Stroud's start. No doubt he's been amazing and looks like the most NFL ready and potential, full-time starter for many years to come of all of the rookies. But, this is a Texans team coming into the year. Ask yourself what you thought of them before the season started. So, yeah, this Saints defense is playing extremely well and will present some problems and probably cause some confusion for Stroud. So, yeah, I don't mind that one at all.
Hey, let's dive into some of your picks. Carolina at Miami. Most people probably think, he's going to hammer the Dolphins here to kick the shit out of them. No, you're going Panthers. +13. Holler at me.
Yeah, this is ugly, but this is the time of the year where you just have to bet some of the teams that have looked so bad in the NFL. And Panthers haven't won a game. And just to show you, and look, this when I break this one down, and because of that, I'll finish my thought. Because the Panthers haven't won a game, nobody wants to bet the Panthers. I think as of now, like 95% of the bets are on the Dolphins. It's on track to be the biggest public side over the past 20 years. And public sides win all the time. Public sides are actually winning, I think, 63%. But it illustrates to you that no one wants to bet these teams. So because of that, you get a couple extra points. And, these teams, you're buying them at their most possible bottom, which is what I think is the case with the Panthers here on the road. And just to illustrate that point, winless road dogs catching more than 10 points in week 6 or later over the past 20 years. So these are teams that haven't won a game. They're catching over 10. No one wants to bet them. 26-8 against the spread, 76.5%. So it just illustrates that all it is contextualizing. Okay, you want to buy low on these teams. This is a Dolphins defense that's still bad. If you look at success rate, the Dolphins and Panthers are actually tied for the second worst success rate allowed in the NFL. They're tied exactly. So the Panthers should be able to do some things offensively. Their pass defense has been better than their run D. and they should get Dante Jackson back at corner. Last week they were playing three guys off the street in the secondary. Dante Jackson will return this week, which will help a little bit. And you don't have A-Chain running the ball, and he's just a rocket ship for the Dolphins. The Dolphins will still get their points, but I think the Panthers can. And here's the other thing. The Dolphins have the Eagles next week. And there comes a point with these teams who have just been rolling where you don't want to show everything every game. And so the Dolphins will be more than happy to get a big lead. All the stuff that McDaniel wants to show, there's no need to waste it. Also risk injury against the Panthers at home. There also could be some wind here, which helps the Panthers. But see, in some of these spots, you've seen it with the Chiefs in the past. You're not rolling out the whole playbook and showing all of your advanced motion and giving teams more film on what you want to do. So you could get a vanilla effort, especially after Miami goes up. Backdoor could be wide open. This is just I'm gonna bet it at 13.5. It never gets to 14. I'm waiting to see if it gets to 14. But this is a huge number in the NFL, especially for a team that has a bad defense in a potential sleepy spot with weather. There's gonna be heavy winds here. So I think this is the bottom of the market on the Panthers. Teams that average, and another thing that just shows you if you're scared to bet this, teams that average 35 points per game or more, as the Dolphins, they average 36 points per game, which leads the NFL, against teams that average below 20. So teams are scoring over 2 touchdowns more than the other team in week 6 or later over the past 20 years. They are 20, 39, and 4 against the spread. I mean, like, that's as bad as it gets. So these are teams that are who wants to back the team that's averaging under 20 against a team that's averaging over 35?
Not a soul.
Nobody. So that, and I just still, trends you can use each way, but I'm just using them to illustrate the buy low, sell high aspect. So I think this is the bottom of the market on the Panthers. And I'm going to buy them, hold my nose, and hope for the best.
Well, you just got to be a human being and put yourself as a player on the Dolphins. Last week, even though they're playing a shitty Giants team, they're coming off getting embarrassed by the Bills. So they're going to come out swinging. They did. They controlled that game. Honestly, the eye test on that game felt like 50-0. Somehow the final score was 31-6. Right? I mean, I think 7 of the points came on a pick 6 from Tua. But like you said, I didn't even realize it until you said it and bring up their schedule. It's not even just at the Eagles. That's Sunday Night Football. That's going to be such a hyped game. These guys are human beings. I mean, they're watching the film. Coaches are screaming at them, take them seriously. No chance you got the best practices this week. This has, honestly, like you look up, classic NFL, Panthers are up like 10-0, and they're just sleepwalking. 10 a.m. West Coast kickoff. Obviously, the Dolphins, you'd be stunned if they lose the game, but I could see them definitely sleepwalking. Here's something every football fan should know. You can get anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. Well, almost anything, because you can't get your dream running back for your fantasy team delivered with Uber Eats, but they will deliver get flapjacks, tacos, and 6-packs. Great pass protection? No. Great pizza selection? Yes. Championship defense? No. Deodorant? Yes. Turnovers? No. Turnovers, the pastry? Yes. Because that's groceries. And get those delivered with Uber Eats too. And food from your favorite restaurants. And other essentials. So this season, get anything. Well, almost anything for game day by ordering on the Uber Eats app. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol in select markets, product availability may vary by region. See app for details. Speaking of the other game you like that falls under a lot of the same categories that you just brought up, the Giants at the Bills. Now, unlike the Dolphins, this team's coming off not just a loss, I would say a pretty devastating loss when you factor in the injuries. Now, this game's at Buffalo. The place is going to be rocking. But defensively, this team has been, taking some fucking massive hits the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And by the way, if you go back, this is another spot where I think this is just the bottom mark of the Giants, who haven't covered yet on the season. They have yet to cover. And look, when I look at the Bills, number one, it's not a great spot. They were just in London. They're coming back to Buffalo. There's just been a lot of travel over the past 2 weeks, and they've lost 3 all-pro caliber defensive players in the past 2 weeks. You lose Milano, the heart and soul of that dude, does so much at linebacker. You lose your shutdown corner in Trey White. You lose your D tackle Daquan Jones, who was leading the NFL among all interior defensive linemen in pass block win rate. You have other injuries also to other players who are questionable. Russo and Von Miller still doesn't look like himself. I think he came back just to play in London. This defense has lost a lot of guys. And if you look, last week, the Giants were catching 13, 12.5 at Miami. Daniel Jones gets hurt. They were playing without anybody, and they might be playing without anybody this week. They still had a chance to cover that game, even though they got destroyed. That's the NFL. Like these big numbers, even if you're getting blown out, teams are going to completely take their foot off the gas. There's just no reason to show much. You just want to preserve your, like, they don't run it up like in college. So, but I look at this game, and now Buffalo's laying 14.5 at home against the Giants in a bad spot, coming back from London after losing 3 all-pro defensive players with other defensive injuries. You're probably going to get Tyrod Taylor here. I don't think it's that much of a drop-off. The other factor that I like here, other than like it's just so hard to cover.
Could argue it's an upgrade.
Yeah, could argue it's an upgrade. He can give you a little bit more. It's slightly more. Daniel Jones is very mobile. But Daniel Jones also has lost the plot because he's been under so much pressure that he's just he's lost right back there. Like, he's not Daniel Jones that we saw last year where everything was simplified for him. I also think Barkley might play. We'll see how effective he can be. But the offense used to rely on him, early last year, and then that set everything else up. You can run on the Bills. So I think that if Barkley plays, you're going to go heavy 12 personnel, bring in 2 tight ends, and then just try to grind this game down and push. And Dable knows the Buffalo offense and the Buffalo defense extremely well. So I think that he'll have a really good game plan here for how to simplify things, how to attack. The Giants have been dreadful. Who wants to bet the Giants? Nobody. I guess except me. 14.5, I think, is just too many points against Buffalo team coming back from London with defensive injuries. The Dable familiarity, I think, works in your favor. And teams that have yet to cover a game in game 6 or beyond, again, teams no one wants to bet, past 30 seasons, 68% against the spread, including 5-1 as a double-digit underdog. Panthers also haven't covered a game either, so they fall into that. 5-1 double-digit underdogs. 3 of the 6 won outright. So you go back in history, you'll see some. This is still the NFL. These are still professional football players. You'll see some. You go back like 2011. There was a Saints game. They were like 17-point favorites and lost. Like, this is still the NFL. It wouldn't even completely shock me if like the Giants or Panthers somehow won this week. We've seen it in the past, but ultimately, I'm not going to sit here and say rosy things about the Giants or Panthers. I just think that this is the bottom of the market, and there's reasons to believe, Buffalo defensive injuries to travel. Miami, their schedule ahead, their defense isn't great, of why I don't have a problem just trying to stay within 2 touchdowns with an NFL team that I think is at the bottom of the market.
One thing will be interesting now with Buffalo suffering those 2 devastating season-long injuries. Daquan Jones, what's his injury?
He's on IR.
But the other guys are gone. Obviously, Milano's leg was in an air cast, and Trey White ripped his Achilles or ACL or whatever. I wonder if Buffalo kind of morphs into Miami. Defensively, they're a shell of themselves. They're not able to really stop anyone, because the reason we loved Buffalo going into the Miami game was how awesome their defense was. Relative, that's what you had to do to stop Miami. Now that defense becomes middle of the pack to below. All of a sudden, they're just an offensive-led team. And Josh, like last week, if he's a little off, they're in trouble. Same thing with Tua. Tua's a little off. You got a chance to beat them. So those 2 teams might start mirroring each other, which is something to keep an eye on. And then last but not least, a guy who it was just fun to see him, and I get he's playing the Cardinals, but just looked like himself again, just throwing bombs, hitting Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase, after said, I'm always fucking open, getting the rock, kicking ass, taking names. The Bengals are fun when their offense is humming, and their offense gained life, and I think it all started with he just didn't look right, and we can argue, should he be out there, should he not? It's the NFL. You guys play, and it's just a reality. Joe Burrow, if he's able to play, unless the doctor is going to refuse to let him out there, he's going to play. And he did not even remotely look close to the guy that we've become accustomed to. Last week, it feels like clearly that calf and his lower body looks better. He was definitely, it looked fantastic to see the ball come out of his hand and hit guys in stride. So are the Bengals back 1, going to Seattle? Seattle's got life, coming off a bye. This is a nice little test for Cincinnati. Like, if they are back, they win this game.
Yeah. I think, with Burrow, there's two things at play with Burrow. You scared me for a second because I was 99.9% sure this game is in Cincinnati. Yeah, it's it. But you said go to Seattle, and I was like, wait,
Where games in Cincinnati.
and
Yeah.
games in Cincy.
Yeah, my fault.
So yeah, I think if you look prior to last week at some advanced metrics that look at like EPA, completion percentage over expectation, Burrow was the worst quarterback in the NFL through their first 4 games. Worse than Zach Wilson, worse than you name it. Last week, and he couldn't plant, he couldn't move, and because he couldn't move, he couldn't go through his progressions, and he was just throwing balls into the dirt. He was clearly hurt. Last week, he finally looked healthy. A couple throws where he had to kind of open up and throw to the outside were a little short. Other than that, all of his touchdown passes, evading pressure. He was scrambling. He was going through his progressions, because not only do I think he's now healthy, and then look, he's getting another week where that's an injury that just keeps getting better, as long as you don't inflame it. But not only that, it's that Burrow was hurt leading up to the season, and which happened the past 2 seasons. He had a knee injury one season, and he had his appendix removed another season. And in each of the past now 3 seasons, when he was not playing at all leading up to the start of the regular season, the Bengals have gotten off to extremely slow starts. And Burrow is like, he's a timing-based quarterback, and once he gets going, he gets going. And that's what's happened. So not only do I think he's healthier, but I think also he's just gotten that natural timing down. And, to illustrate that, in week 6 or later in his career, he's 19-8 against the spread, over 70%. And for what it's worth, he's 17-3-1 against the spread in his last 21 games against non-divisional opponents. So when he's not playing those defenses in the AFC North that have really good defenses, have a good understanding how to attack the Cincy team, Burrow has been almost automatic. So I think the Bengals are still undervalued. So I don't think the market is really pricing into the fact of what I believe is that Burrow's, I would say 95%. Maybe he's 100% this week. Just it was 1 or 2 throws just to the outside, and he's got to open up and rely on that calf a little more. But other than that, moving around, scrambling, evading pressure, going through his progressions, and then feeding Chase, which is always a smart idea. I think he threw it to 19 times, targeted him 19 times in the game. And then the Seahawks, I don't mind. I know they're coming off a bye, but this is a team I'm looking to sell. Not a full believer in them. I mean, the last 2 teams they beat were the Panthers and the Giants. Who cares? And then before that, they had a decent win at Detroit. But Detroit had a number of injuries that week, coming off the KC win. Seattle needed a pick 6, and then they get the ball in overtime to score. Easily could have lost that game without the bad Goff pick 6. So not completely. Look, Seattle is also not going to get pressure. I know they got pressure on the Giants. Everyone does. But this is not a defensive line. It's going to get pressure on Burrow. So Burrow's going to be able to sit back there, even though I think he now can move around and evade pressure like he did last week. But he's going to have time to cook. So I'll trust Burrow over Geno at home, where I basically just need him to win the game. I think the Bengals are too low here.
Yeah, this is an interesting spot for Geno, because I remember him having a really good game against the Lions, and he was 32 of 41. He threw for 330 yards. Controlled environment indoors. This game outdoors, crowd would be rocking. Like this is the spot last year down the stretch where he didn't quite look like the guy that became the comeback player of the year, 30 touchdowns, and the guy they wanted to re-sign. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm like you. I tend to go. This is usually when he regresses a little bit more than the time that, like, the following week he's playing the Cardinals. I would expect like 3 touchdowns, at home. But this is a spot that, is the reason he's kind of Geno Smith. And people are like, Middlekauff, you're being a hater. I don't know. I don't buy it fully, though. Seattle secondary is pretty good. I mean, that Witherspoon, they're the guy they took 5th, which ultimately probably came down to him and Jalen Carter, was a bold pick for them, but the dude's a fucking baller. And obviously Pete Carroll's a secondary guy. Defensively, the Giants were in such shambles. I mean, their offensive line might as well have me, you, and 3 other guys out there. So it's hard to judge their, the 28 sacks they had on Monday Night Football. But can they get after the Bengals? Was that more of an outlier situation? This is just an interesting game for both these teams to really, however this plays out, I think we'll have a better gauge on both of them. Because to me, if Seattle wins, then, like, are they competing for that 5th seed? Because is Dallas unlocked to be the best wild card team? they lose, then, maybe that 5th seed ends up just being a bunch of teams, 10 wins competing for that spot.
Yeah, no, Seattle would definitely get my respect if they win this game. I'd have to take them a little bit more seriously, but it's at the end of the day, this is what I think is now almost 100% Burrow against Geno Smith. I do like this Seattle secondary. Look no further than Illinois. The Illinois defense last year was elite. I mean, yes, they lost 3 guys in the top 75, one of them Witherspoon, but the 3 defensive backs went in the top 75 of the NFL draft. Their defense this year is
terrible,
horrendous. I think the Bengals get it done here. This is a massive game for Cincy to get back to 500, stay really in the mix in the AFC. I mean, they still can go on a big run, but they have the hardest remaining schedule if you look at strength of schedule rankings of any team in the NFL. So this is a big game to get at home after a slow start. You basically could feel like, okay, we're still in the mix. We survived with the Burrow injury. So I think they come out here really motivated. And I think they can get after Geno and that offensive line. Trey Hendrickson's playing out of his mind. Trey Hendrickson has 6 sacks, should have 9. He had 3 that were negated by illegal contact calls that really had nothing to do with the play. But he's playing out of his mind. So I think they'll pressure Geno into a couple of mistakes. And if I'm down 4 late with 3 minutes to go and I need to Burrow to drive the field with a touchdown, I'm not sweating too much, and I'll trust them to win this game.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have that much faith in the first place Pittsburgh Steelers right now. They hold on for dear life every single game.
Insane.
So, well, Stuckey, let's enjoy the week. That's Cincy. You got me fired up on the Cincy Seattle game. And I might, do a little money line parlay. Maybe not money line, but the Giants Carolina. I like those stats past week 6. That's interesting. Have a good weekend.
Don't parlay them. Maybe bet both separately. I don't think both are both winning.
Not a money line parlay, but just take the big lines.
Throw a little, maybe just throw a little couch.
Just a little scratch to keep me interested in the games that I wouldn't be that interested in. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the big college games, and then let's have a good Sunday.
Absolutely. Good luck.
Something magical happens when the third quarter ends and the fourth quarter begins. The energy changes. The fourth quarter is where games are won, where champions are made. And in business, it's where sales teams become legends. That's why HubSpot built Sales Hub, to give sales reps the deal-making tools they need to win in Q4 and close the year strong. Sales Hub Prospecting Workplaces organizes your schedule, goals, and to-do lists in one place to save your team precious fourth quarter time. Smart sequences help sales reps close deals faster than ever. And with an easy-to-use deal management tool, reps can find, track, and close deals all in one place. Plus, AI forecasting helps you accurately predict future success, which means less hoping for deals and more crushing targets. Put your sales team on the fast track to winning Q4 with Sales Hub. Learn more at HubSpot.com/sales.